And a big part of why the gut microbiome impacts our health is because it is so adaptable that it's kind of how we maintain metabolic flexibility. For example, by changing or improving the diversity of our gut microbiome, we can better metabolize sugar. We can better metabolize fats, proteins. We can better deal with stress or recover from exercise, right? And so I think in an interesting way, it kind of answers the question of like the way you treat your gut directly impacts your metabolic flexibility long term.
Hi everyone, we have Dr. Rosa Keller here. She's a registered dietitian and nutrition scientist. Thank you for coming on the podcast with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So we were just talking about this earlier, but I also was gonna go down the food and nutrition field, but I ended up pivoting. So I feel like it's very admirable that, you furthered your education to get your doctorate. I'm curious, like, what made you so intrigued to go down this route?
Yeah, so it was one of those things where I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I kept going to school initially. But, my dad is a big avid gardener. My mom's in the restaurant business. So I think I just uniquely was always surrounded by food in one way or another, kind of grew up in the restaurant and loved science. Originally, I was a biochem major. But then I felt like, well, how can I make this more relevant to my body, my family's bodies? How can it be more applicable? And so I remember getting into nutrition and just being so fascinated with it. It's such a delicate science, sometimes an art more than a science, and it's a really challenging but interesting way to kind of see biochemistry and science through the lens of food. And always was really passionate about understanding why certain cultural diets, Asian cuisine versus the American Western diet and things have different effects on our human body, and we're kind of seeing that now, right? With the Western diet, and so that's kind of where the interest lied. Where I kind of got more interested in nutrition, how it applies to exercise and sports, was kind of growing up a gymnast and really understanding what I ate, affected my outcomes as an athlete. And it just kind of was coincidence that when I was at Oregon State, my advisor at the time was researching nitrate from plant foods. So are you very familiar?
Beetroot?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So I think many of us think nitrates are a bad thing, right? When we think about bacon and processed meat and stuff. And so it has this like negative connotation. But the emerging science at the time, so that was like 5 years ago, so maybe 25 years ago, almost by accident was discovered to improve oxygen efficiency. And so it was kind of like the perfect time of like understanding something that maybe was negative in one context could be really positive in another. And I found that to be really fascinating, So even though I'm not actively publishing right now, it really led me down that road of just wanting to become a better expert at how nutrition applies to performance.
Wow.
Before we jump deep, did you didn't want to go down the tenure track?
Yeah, well, I think, and I actually was just talking about this earlier this week, is I finished my PhD COVID 2020, and I remember finishing, my dissertation, not being able to go to the lab, not being able to go to the office, not even being able to, interact with my advisors at the time.
Weren't you considered essential? They won't let you into the lab?
Here and there, but kind of like one person at a time, Yeah. And so
social distancing.
Yeah, and so I just remember finishing, and it just didn't really seem like the route I wanted to take. I wasn't ready to go into like a postdoc and like associate professor because at the time it just didn't seem like the best option. And I would say, I kind of came from a background of a family of entrepreneurs, and so I was like, I'd like to see, how this could go a different direction. And I didn't have my dietetics license at the time. Because actually I at first didn't even know what that was. I just did nutrition science because it was science, and then later found out that I kind of really wanted more of that like one-on-one counseling direct effect on people, versus being
Yeah.
a bench lab
That's
scientist.
totally
Yeah.
her passion. What ethnic background are you on the Asian side?
Yeah,
I'm
so my mom is Chinese, but grew up in Taiwan, so Taiwanese. And then my dad is like German Irish.
Okay.
So yeah,
I'm
How about you?
Taiwanese too.
Taiwanese.
No, but earlier you said gut Asian cuisine because my wife's Korean. They eat a lot of kimchi, and that's actually a great source of probiotics, right?
Yeah, definitely.
We're hearing more about the gut microbiome and how that influences everything from aging to energy. And you talk a lot about Healthspan on your in your content. What is Healthspan exactly, and how does our gut health actually connect to how well we age?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question, and I think I started choosing the word health span instead of longevity or lifespan because I think it carries a lot more weight, right? When we think about health span, it's not just about how many years we live. It's about the years that we are living. And I love to ask both my clients and just people this question, like if you had all the time and money in the world, what would you do? And then the next question being, okay, so now physically, can you? And kind of then it makes you think more about, do I have the energy? Do I have the stamina? And not only that, but can I physically do it, right? Like if you're like, I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, can you? And so I think that makes us start to think, well, what in our lives and our lifestyle then impacts the ability to physically be able to do those things, whether it's small changes like, eating certain foods to get more energy to make it through your day or play with your children or your grandkids, or if it's more like I'm a performance athlete or I'm someone that wants to do some amazing hike and needing to know how to both improve exercise performance, but the nutrition required to do that. And not only just food, but the supplementation as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more. So that's one way I like to describe it to maybe someone that's not as well versed in like the science. Another way is this concept of what we call metabolic flexibility, which is more about kind of the idea that everybody can adapt differently to different stressors based on their metabolic flexibility, right? So when we think about a lot of the diseases we have, kind of lifestyle related diseases like diabetes and cardiovascular disease, it's not that eating certain foods once in a while is bad, but the lifestyle we've created makes us very metabolically inflexible, meaning, you can't adapt easily to changes in your environment, changes in your physical activity, changes in, food that you eat, things like that.
Okay. What's your process when you're talking to a client to figure out what those metabolic stressors are? Like, is it a series of questions? Are you looking at their labs? Are you is it a mix of everything?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It is a mix of both. I think many people kind of initially when they come to a dietitian, it's not usually just because, I don't have enough energy, right? It's they got their lab results back and either their cholesterol was high or their A1C was showing prediabetes, meaning higher blood glucose levels over time. But then also helping them understand that, yes, the labs say one thing, but how do you feel, right? Like those qualitative measures that actually, I think, carry us into action or motivation more long term, right? Like after I eat my lunch, I'm super sluggish and I can't finish my day. Or after I eat this certain food, I'm bloated and uncomfortable and it affects my sleep. Or I have heartburn, right? And all of those things can very easily and over time working together kind of be tied to the timing of what you're eating, kind of like the chronic patterns of how you eat.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a mix of both.
Regarding that metabolic flexibility, what percentage of the population do you think has very high flexibility?
Oh, I don't know like an exact number
You don't
for
have to
that.
quote PubMed or anything.
Yeah. I would say that if you look at the U.S. population and how many people, let's say the average adult, right? So we're saying, let's just say like 18 up. I would say that maybe like 20 to 30%, so maybe a third of all. And that's because, you're resilient when you're younger. But as you get older, more of these kind of lifestyle related diseases seem to increase. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's just because we're older, right? And I think that's the biggest message around Healthspan is it seems that it's just a part of getting older, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, right? Like, if you don't use it, you lose it is kind of one of the biggest things I say to all my clients. Like, exercise is one of the best ways to extend lifespan. And how can we do that? How can we improve our exercise through nutrition, through changing of habits, and a lot of those different things.
And how does gut health specifically tie into health span, like the longevity of your health span?
Yeah, so the gut is increasingly, well studied, but we still have a long way to go, right? So just from like a simple perspective, we have a lot more understanding of the associations between these metabolic diseases we've been talking about, and how that affects our gut microbiome. But it's even more than that, right? Like, if more and more of children or more and more of our environment outside of food are being affected negatively, right? The increase in allergies, the increase in pollutants, and the increase in changing environments that are not as sustainable for our gut microbiome, then it leads to worse outcomes at a younger age. So kind of in a more direct way, that's how I would say it relates. In a less direct way, many different things change our microbiome, right? If you lose sleep one day, you'll have a change. Stress changes it, right? And so it's like not this one-way street, it's this two-way relationship that's, I think, really important. And I think more and more, even younger generations are caring a lot more, not only about what they eat, but about their mental health and how that relationship, connects the two. I think that answered your question.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, what is something surprising that most people might not know that affect our gut? Like, some people haven't heard that candles could actually affect our gut microbiome.
What?
Yeah.
Candles?
Like, right? Certain candles? Or...
Like certain environmental pollutants and stuff.
Pollutants, yeah.
That stuff is, so out of my knowledge base. But
okay.
but it's so true, right? Like, it's not even just that. It's like the environmental pollutants that we breathe in living in the LA area, right? So, but something that maybe isn't as well known that impacts your gut, let's see.
But if not, we can stick to
No,
food.
that's a good question. I mean,
thought the sleep on was is that data? Is there evidence behind that?
Yeah, definitely. There's
Just
evidence.
A couple bad nights of sleep, your gut's affected.
I mean, travel alone, like, not even just because of the fact that you're traveling into a different. I guess this is mine. And you're not just traveling to a different place because of the environment, but the actual travel itself, right? Changing your circadian rhythms, changing your sleep and day, and all of that actually impacts it as well. So it's a really, it's a whole kind of living organism that we have coexisted with our entire lives. So we're getting more information, regularly on how it works, but we still have a really long way to go, I think.
So with all these impacts, you want to be metabolic flexible, right, to adapt to all these changes, right?
Exactly. And a big part of why the gut microbiome impacts our health is because it is so adaptable that it's kind of how we maintain metabolic flexibility. For example, by changing or improving the diversity of our gut microbiome, we can better metabolize sugar. We can better metabolize fats, proteins. We can better deal with stress or recover from exercise, right? And so I think in an interesting way, it kind of answers the question of, like, the way you treat your gut directly impacts your metabolic flexibility long term.
Okay, that's amazing. And let's say when it comes to food, what are the most impactful foods that someone can eat to, or habits or foods that they can start with?
Yeah, so I would say the number one thing to keep it simple for most of my clients and people in general is 80-20 rule of 80% of the time, if you can eat whole foods, meaning something that you can find on a farm or in a farmer's market or in a garden and know what it is, right? Like when you see an egg, you know it's an egg. When you see a vegetable, you know what it is, right? If you can kind of eat the majority of your foods that are what I like to call whole food based primarily, that's one way. Because if you think about it, if it comes from the ground, if it comes from the farm, if it comes from an animal, it's already kind of evolutionarily developed to cohabitate with our microbiome,
that makes
right?
sense.
The more that we kind of process things and change them from their original form, the more foreign they become to our gut microbiome and to our own cells. You have a question?
That 80-20 rule, where would you guess most your average, 30-something Americans at right now?
Yeah.
Like the opposite of that, right?
Yes, definitely. Well, and then the 20 being like processed, ultra processed cookies, birthday parties, Chick-fil-A, whatever you want.
Yeah.
But because we're so, resilient, as long as the majority of the time we're getting those whole foods, our body can manage, that 20%. And we shouldn't feel that food is just so rule-based. To answer your question, I would say in the U.S., I think we really have to divide that up regionally. Let's just say like L.A., California. We have a really great access to whole foods in this state. But the way that the food systems are set up, right? You go to a grocery store, how much % of it is the whole foods versus, the center of the grocery store being the
First things you see are the processed foods.
Exactly. And they're colorful, right? Because
The packaging.
because our brains are like, oh, fruit's colorful, vegetables are colorful, but now it's everything in the store is colorful.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But with my clients, I would say I always ask them that question. Like the goal is 80-20, but what would you say you're at right now?
Yeah.
And I worked with people kind of on the East Coast and here as well, so it was interesting to see the difference. I would say anywhere from like 50-50 a little bit, closer to 70-30, but I've definitely had clients, especially on the East Coast in some places that maybe don't have as much access, where they said their parents never even required them to eat fruit. And when they started to change their diet to more whole foods, it was almost kind of like they were seen as different or kind of made fun of for kind of transitioning more to a whole foods diet,
Yeah, they even made like cotton candy flavored grapes. So it's like they're like transitioning you slowly.
Those are delicious too. Those are super sweet. Well, and I think that's another thing, right? Is like if you're not used to eating fruit, you're like, well, it's not sweet enough. But if you've had like a piece of fruit from like a grocery store versus the farmer's market, you're like, they're so different, right? Of course you don't want to eat that banana, orange, and apple every day, right?
Yeah.
Versus going to like a farmer's market and getting like seasonal blueberries where you're like, this is like candy.
I just took my family to an ethnic farmer's market and they had like all the most esoteric like fruits from all over the world.
Yeah.
And half of it looked like came from someone's backyard, which is the best, right? Because it's not sprayed.
There's like still dirt on it.
Yeah, it's like how nature intended, so it's really cool.
Yeah, and to your point about dirt still being on it, that's actually another thing is we actually built our microbiome from a young age because we were interacting with the soil as well. So like this is a really fun fact that I love sharing is we used to be able to get a lot of our vitamin B12 from the water and the dirt of our food. Not just from animal products.
Wow.
Yeah. So now that a lot of foods are a bit more, I don't know, not necessarily sterile, but don't have that much interaction with like the natural soils and the quality of the soils have changed, it really directly impacts us.
You're like, so don't wash your vegetables. Just kidding.
I guess maybe
kidding.
don't wash them if you pick them yourself, but if you get them from Safeway, you should.
I will literally put a little soil or sand in my mouth and just to pick up any random microbials from different terrains or what do you call it? What do the French call it? Terroir? Terroir? The land? How do you call it in French?
Oh.
La terre, yeah, whatever.
No, it's so interesting. I mean, yeah, what to your point about the exotic fruits? I went to the Irvine Farmers Market and there was like this organic place and they had dragon fruit, passion fruit, and I was like, did you guys grow this? And they're like, yeah, we grow everything. Oh my gosh, it was the best dragon fruit I've ever had. It was so good.
There's so much real flavor in there versus your commercial variety for obvious reasons, right? So I think when you going back to what you said, when you jump from processed foods, they have been engineered to make our mind tickle and laugh because it tastes so good, right? But that's not what nature intended.
Yeah.
Unless you eat a really ripe passion fruit in season, right? Then
Yeah.
you're like, holy moly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then earlier you were talking about feeding our microbes. What does that look like practically, I guess, like through food?
Yeah, I know, because it can be kind of like it's like an analogy. You're like, what does that even mean, right? Like,
Yeah.
I thought we just eat to feed ourselves.
And it's interesting too, because I feel like in your position, like, you know so much about it that, like, if you just talk about food or what you know naturally, people might not, like, they don't know what you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, or like sometimes I'll try to talk about how, feeding your microbes gives us forms of energy, but for most of us, we think, oh, calories, energy, calories. That's like the only relationship. Whereas when it comes to our microbiome, right, let's say, okay, you just ate like a sweet potato and a salad with chicken, for example. Your body converts the protein and the carbohydrates and the fat into usable energy, right, that we need for every cell in our body. Whereas the leftover stuff, which like we call fiber, but not just fiber, but like other forms of nutrients within that food, like the polyphenols and some of the micronutrients, all of that becomes a form of nutrients that's provided to the microbes, which then they metabolize sometimes to proliferate, right? Like grow more of, but also to make byproducts that actually benefit us. So I think the one we know the best is fiber. And so like, for example, with that sweet potato, right? All of the carbohydrates, because they're still considered carbohydrates, they're just indigestible by humans, meaning we don't have the enzymes that break down those carbohydrates to convert to energy, which is like this perfect symbiotic relationship, because the gut bugs are like, well, perfect, you're not going to use it for energy, I'm going to use it for energy. And so most of the bacteria in our like large intestine, right, where most of that metabolism is happening, converts those starches and those fibers that we don't use into beneficial compounds like short chain fatty acids. One of the most important one being butyrate. Have you heard much about short chain fatty acids?
I was just going to ask you about that. One of the byproducts is butyrate, right? And butyrate has a host of benefits, right? If you could elaborate more.
Yeah. So that is definitely the one that we seem to understand the best in terms of how butyrate then becomes a metabolite that kind of systemically goes throughout our entire body and benefits us. One of the main ways it does is it's the primary energy source for the cells in our colon. So if we can provide more energy from the fiber to create butyrate, then we're more efficiently producing energy in the cells of our colon. 70% of the energy from the cells in our colon are produced from butyrate. Yeah, and so if you think about it, a lot of digestive health issues and a lot of challenges we have are surrounded with, poor health in our large intestine. And not only that, yes, they help, create energy more efficiently through the mitochondria with butyrate, but kind of more downstream effects. We see improvements in like reductions of anti-inflammatory markers in the brain, in the liver, in nearly every organ in our body. And so it's really cool to see this kind of perfect relationship between, the parts of the food that we don't consume for energy that our microbiome requires to then, keep us healthy.
So to dumb it down for our audience, or let me rephrase that, in lay person's terms,
yes,
by eating more plant fibers or vegetable fibers, there are some fibers that our body can't use, but the bacteria in our colon can use. That generates a byproduct called butyrate, which ironically or incidentally feeds 70% of our colon.
The cells, yeah.
Cells in our colon. So the cells in our colon are getting their energy and essentially life from a byproduct of fiber.
Yeah. So it's like this indirect fuel source, I guess you could say. And so when you think about processed food, is there fiber in that? Not really, right? We get fiber from primarily fruits and vegetables and starches and beans and legumes. And most of, the food, at least in this country, and think about chips and white bread and candy and stuff, a lot of that stuff is totally, ridden of any fiber. And so we're missing kind of like this really key ingredient that, benefits our health.
Okay. So how would that all tie in with sports performance and recovery? Let's just say when you're talking about energy, because a lot of athletes just focus strictly on like macros and training. But what would you say from your perspective when it comes to the gut?
Yeah, so a couple different things, are important. It's, aside from the kind of fiber process that we just talked about, gastrointestinal symptoms are like one of the biggest challenges for many athletes. And I think we can all attest, like if you ate like an In-N-Out burger right before a big workout, you would probably feel pretty terrible, right?
That's you, Jarrett.
Versus if you ate a banana, right? Or a sweet potato, right? So not only are those foods providing more carbohydrates that we use for energy, but they're also providing fiber that provides a more stable long-term form of energy for, the butyrate production and others. So I would say one way is the butyrate pathway, the other being managing gastrointestinal symptoms. Many of the symptoms we have is indigestion, that is a signaling process from how our body is metabolizing and absorbing food, and our mental kind of interpretation of that response.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways, right? When you're anxious and you eat something, you feel worse. And the same is true for when you eat something that maybe doesn't sit as well. That signaling is a process of signaling from your gut microbiome to your brain as well.
That makes sense.
Oh, so you're telling me if you ate something really bad, let's say I just ate a packet of gummies and I feel tired, part of that tired perception is the gut signaling to the brain?
Kind of, with that example. So have you ever like ate really whole foods and healthy for a while and then eaten something like maybe not as great or something
That's
you knew?
me every Monday to Thursday and then Friday and Saturday.
And then that first meal is like, oh, something doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
But if you were to eat that way every day, you would kind of be normalized to that, right? A part of that process is the signaling that occurs with your gut microbiome and your brain. So one way to kind of give you an example of what that means is a lot of individuals with irritable bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel disease or have kind of any issue with when they eat something, they bloat, they feel very uncomfortable, they feel like they have feelings of anxiety. Individuals that, are just alone kind of told that the food is going to be okay can help them get over their symptoms. For example, many of my IBS clients, which is inflammatory bowel syndrome, come to me and just the act alone of talking to me manages their anxiety, which then manages their symptoms to the food itself.
So it's partially placebo?
Placebo, but also a relationship that's occurring between the signaling of how you're interpreting something and how it's actually affecting you. But you could say placebo could also be that similar relationship between the way you're perceiving something and your gut. I think
what you said was really, because I always wonder, how does someone eat fast food every day, right? To me, like I love Taco Bell. That was my favorite food for like the first 30 years of my life. But now when I have Taco Bell, I still enjoy it, but I feel like not so great afterwards. And then it has me questioning, how can someone eat this like every day, right? But as you said earlier, if it's the part of the norm, if that's what your gut environment is used to, it doesn't affect you as much, right?
Yeah, and that is something that we don't really understand very well yet. But it's very, I would say anecdotally, working with clients and from like a larger scale, we know that there's a relationship between our mental state and how we feel like gastrointestinal symptoms, and the other way as well, right? Another component, kind of to your question about how does this all play into performance, the way, or I guess what we eat impacts how we absorb nutrients from a microbiome perspective too, right? Like the ability to break down certain nutrients is directly related to the types of microbes we have around as well. So, for example, our gut microbes not only make butyrate, they make branched chain fatty acids, they make B vitamins. A lot of our microbiome are carbohydrate utilizers, right? So if you think about lactose, for example, our body has microbes that can break down lactose. And some people, like many Asian people, we can't break down lactose as well, right?
Guilty as charged.
Yes. And, I saw this study a long time ago, and I don't know how accurate it is. You could maybe look it up. But like 80% of Asian individuals don't have the ability to break down lactose.
Because we're missing a certain microbe, that's it?
An enzyme both in our stomach, but also in our ability to ferment lactose in our gut microbiome as well. So it's a combination of both. Okay. But another way too that I like to point out to many of my athletes is it's not just one thing that you do that impacts it. It's really kind of understanding that diversity of plant foods, diversity of fruits and vegetables and these things is important for diversity of your gut microbiome too, right? It's not like just eat this one fruit and it's going to improve this microbe. You know, it's actually the diversity itself provides a combination of nutrients and a combination of these polyphenols and things that then allow for greater diversity of your gut microbiome as well. And that has impacts on recovery, on your mental health, on your symptom management, all of those different things.
Eat the rainbow, right?
Eat the rainbow.
So.
Exactly.
That must be a lot of fun for you because you basically, with each client, you get to experiment.
Yeah. No, like it's really interesting with the elimination diet, right? Or, you know, people with certain food preferences. Most fun I have is someone who's like, I don't eat fruit. I don't do this. I don't do that. And then over time, you know, 6 months later, they'll be like, you know, showing me photos of like what they were first eating and what they are. And like the difference is so cool to see. And then they'll be like, yeah, and then I went back to like my old breakfast and I felt terrible. So
their environment has changed to the new foods, or the whole foods, right?
Exactly. Yeah, the environment that they're accustomed to. And I mean, there's an interplay between like our genetics and how we metabolize certain foods and the microbiome. So I can't really say it's like one or the other, but there's definitely a really powerful, strong relationship between the two.
And a lot of your doctorate work, you looked at specifically how the nitrates, right, in vegetables influence exercise performance and cardiovascular health. What first drew you to the intersection of food science and athletic performance?
Yeah, so initially I was really just interested in food in general, right? Like growing up Asian, my mom was a really good cook, and then she opened restaurants when I was younger. And I'm actually now kind of in the restaurant business a little bit with my family. But always just like I grew up in a kitchen, and so I've just had that exposure. My dad, he has like a regenerative farm up in Northern California, and
you got really cool parents.
Yeah, and they both have the greenest thumbs, and I'm like working on it from my patio apartment in Irvine. I have like a little garden, nothing compared to what they can do. But I think I just got a really unique opportunity to be around a lot of not only nature but food in general, and so. Just loving science, I wanted to apply that more to the human body. And it was kind of just by coincidence, honestly. I had an undergraduate advisor doing a research study in nitrates, and he was doing this study looking at entire cultural food patterns and actually taking those foods and processing them in the lab to see how many nitrates different cultural eating patterns contained. So
can you share with us some of those findings? Is this public knowledge?
Yeah, this is actually my first published paper. Oh, wow. So yeah, you can pull it if you like. It's like 2017. But what we did was, and again, it's like, there's limitations in a small town like Corvallis, Oregon, to find like Indian cuisine and Asian cuisine, all these things, but we did our best. And what it showed was, the Indian cuisine, the Chinese cuisine, and the Japanese cuisine had much higher amounts of nitrate in their diet than more of like the Western diet. And you can kind of imagine that, right? Being Taiwanese, if you go to a dinner, there's a huge plate of bok choy, right?
Yeah, there's
On
always
the table.
what do you call it? Atsai. There's like
Yes.
all these. Yeah, it's. But those are green leafy vegetables. They're high in nitrates too.
Yes, so that's kind of the point I was getting to is I think you mentioned beetroot earlier as like the one that we kind of associate with being a high nitrate food. And so that's kind of what I didn't know as well. And so kind of going into that first study, going into that lab, it was really interesting because the foods that are highest in nitrate are leafy green vegetables. So arugula, cabbage, bok choy. Celery is not green leafy, but it's high in nitrate too. The celery juice cleanse, high nitrate.
Is it the more darker the green color, or
No, not necessarily. So kale surprisingly doesn't have a lot of nitrate, but the thought is that so we have nitrogen in the soil, right? So the amount of nitrogen in the soil and the amount of nitrogen that plant takes up into the leaf or the root, so like beetroot or other roots like daikon and things have it too. The more it takes up, the more nitrate it then stores for human consumption.
Does nitrate convert? This is a common bro science thing we have going on.
Okay.
Does nitrate convert into nitric, or does it turn into nitric oxide eventually?
Yes.
Okay.
So kind of walking into that path, nitrate is NO3. So you have one nitrogen and 3 oxygens, right? That's like the stable form that you find in the highest amounts in plants. And if you think about it, nitrogen is storing itself energetically in the plant. Let's just kind of think about it like that. So when you eat foods with nitrate in them, they convert to nitrite, releasing 1 oxygen. And it does this by the microbiome in your mouth. So like actively chewing on it and eating it, the microbes in your mouth reduce it to nitrite. From nitrite, it's more rapidly converted to nitric oxide. So once you've swallowed it, once it's gone into the gastric acidic environment, into your bloodstream, it's more rapidly converted to nitric oxide to be used. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then obviously we know NO production associated with higher cardiovascular function performance. Mm-hmm. And so this goes back to your sports, vegetables and sports, which is a very interesting intersection.
I know.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Like, what did you find? Like, what did you study like that ended up?
Well, I think even what you just said is something that I think about a lot is I think in the sports world, we're like protein, right? Performance equals protein. But it's just such a cool, unique take that is well studied but not well appreciated, that the benefits of plant foods like leafy greens, like telling a bro like you need to eat more leafy greens because it's going to improve your lifting, and they're like, what?
They're like protein
exactly. But yeah, so to kind of like finish that kind of story off, so nitric oxide is simply the signaling molecule in your bloodstream that dilates your blood vessels. So when you need more delivery of oxygen, you need nitric oxide to dilate your blood vessels. So the way it works is that conversion of nitrite to nitric oxide is more effective under low oxygen states, right? So if you think about someone running, they are in a lower oxygen state because they're in what we call hypoxic, because they're using oxygen as fast as they can.
Like lower, if you were to measure their oxygen, like lower oxygen saturation in their bloodstream, is that what you mean by?
Not necessarily, more like, they're working really hard to move oxygen, and so their blood vessels are constricted, right? And so that then signals nitrite to convert to nitric oxide to then dilate the blood vessel. And so that's why this process is more effective under low oxygen conditions. So an example is a runner, right? An athlete. Even when you're doing like HIIT workouts, not necessarily just long distance or endurance. Another situation where we know it's really effective is hypertension or high blood pressure. So individuals with high blood pressure are considered to be in a more hypoxic state, meaning they're not able to deliver oxygen as efficiently. And so by taking arugula or stir-fried bok choy or beetroot juice, you're increasing the ability to produce nitric oxide and lower their blood pressure, which we know is well published.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why it works in both scenarios, if that makes sense.
So the moral of the story is we should just eat a lot more leafy greens.
Yes.
And
Applies
listen
to all
to
the
the
bros
science.
too.
Yeah, more leafy greens. So I guess that's kind of how it relates to sports performance. And I just found it to be so fascinating too, because my research, actually, what I kind of concluded in my PhD was that we can store nitrate in the muscle and the liver and in the brain.
Do you know how long?
Until it needs to be used, right? Kind of like, that's not like scientifically proven like how long it stays, but we do know that by taking nitrate in, we can store it. So there's some really cool research out of Exeter in the UK where they were able to show an increase in muscular nitrate with supplementation. And so I was looking at an animal model at the ability to store, and we found it in muscle, liver, and the brain. Yeah.
So theoretically, an athlete could load up on nitrates like the day before or night before intense physical performance.
Yeah. So it's kind of like,
Wow.
do you know much about creatine?
Just enough.
Okay, so you know how there's like the idea of like taking it daily before working out, or taking
For saturation effects,
saturation
right?
of
Yeah.
it, similar to how we carbohydrate load, right? So we can increase the amount of stored, availability in the muscle. There's both an acute effect of nitrate and a chronic effect. So you're right. If we take a higher dose, maybe 1 or 2 hours before we go run a marathon, that's going to have an effect. But if we take or eat leafy greens every day for weeks before, that also helps to increase the storage.
Interesting. So you could saturate your body with nitrates, essentially.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty new in the last 5 or 6 years. So I don't think there's as much great evidence for like what saturation means. Like in creatine, we have a little bit of better understanding, or like glycogen replenishment. But with nitrate, not as clear. But we definitely know we can store it, right? So before, the first example I gave you, it sounded like, oh, you have to eat it, and then it's converted, and then it's gone. Right? Versus now we're like, oh, we know that we can store nitrate, as well, to be then utilized under exercise conditions.
So is there like misinformation about, let's say, creatine or caffeine or nitrates when it comes to IOC's consensus that like maybe people don't know about?
Yeah, so I use this paper all the time because it's a great paper. Have you like looked at it or read it? No,
I haven't.
It's a long one. But
I did have a foot in academia. I was at UCSF trying to get into the doctoral program, and after the second year, I was like, this is not for me.
Yeah. So really, okay, so what it is a paper done by the International Olympic Committee to take all of the data from some of the leaders in exercise physiology and dietary supplementation and say, what is the evidence actually, rating the evidence, kind of like a meta-analysis to say what is considered good evidence, what is considered to not have a lot of evidence, and what is kind of just we really don't know. And the top 3 being creatine, caffeine, and nitrate. Plus a couple others down, beta-alanine and some others. But these seem to be the most strongly supported based on the evidence we have. And it's interesting. A lot of people don't really know that, right? I think people are now starting to reappreciate creatine.
Yeah.
Now that it's
I supply them with creatine. They go through it like
gummies.
yeah, everything.
Everything. Yeah.
It's so crazy because everyone knows caffeine.
Yes.
It's the most easiest perception 30 minutes in, right?
You can feel it,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Creatine, I do feel like once like we're all taking it, I feel like after 2-3 weeks we could feel it, and some
You can
maybe
kind of see it.
maybe
just a little bit,
recovering.
yeah.
I mean, Lewis is a little bit more jacked now. One of our sales guys. But nitrates, that's like nobody ever talks about nitrates.
I know, right?
That's so crazy. Why are we not talking more about nitrates?
Yeah.
Is the data still too new?
No, I don't think it's that the science is too new, because again, it's well published and well understood for its benefit. I honestly think it's because of the historical connotation with nitrates in bacon and processed meat causing cancer.
Yes.
And
Can you differentiate between the two so people know that nitrates in greens are okay, but nitrates in bacon are not okay?
yeah, so kind of to rewind, there's I wouldn't say old, like it's not outdated science, but it's old science that first attributed the negative effects of processed meat to the nitrate. Nitrate is added specifically to processed meat so that it doesn't lead to botulism producing bacteria. So it's required by the FDA so that we don't get sick. Really fun fact that you can tell everyone is anything that says it's no nitrate or nitrite, they use celery powder, which has nitrate and nitrite, because you know that now from
So
foods.
that bacon's actually healthy now.
Well, if you look at it's just a way of saying, next time you go to like Trader Joe's and it says like no nitrite bacon, look at the back. It's going to say celery powder. But that's besides the point. So what we have started to understand is that when you take a processed meat or like the fat and the compounds from that food with nitrate, it kind of creates this situation or this environment that produces what we call gastric nitrosamines, which are what have been associated with gastric cancer. Now, more and more, the literature kind of reviewing all of that is not really so strongly saying that it's the nitrate or nitrite itself. It's the combination of the processed meat with those additives. Does that make sense? So I think for a while it was seen as it's the nitrate and nitrite, not the meat.
It's almost like
sorry.
I was gonna say it's almost like just to help with the shelf life of the bacon, right? Versus like, let's say if they were to look at fruits, it has to be sprayed with pesticides, but they're still gonna eat the fruit because it's like
yeah. So whereas like the nitrate foods, right, like the leafy greens we've been talking about and beets and things, they come paired with a lot of other things, right? Antioxidants, polyphenols, micronutrients that play a role in kind of mitigating that formation of nitrosamines. So it's, again, another reason why the whole food itself does a lot more than just what we come to appreciate.
So it's basically the protein interacting with the nitrate versus
The protein and the fats.
versus a plant. There's, like you said,
there's a lot more
of
nutrients,
antioxidants, flavonols, polyphenols that, as you said, countermeasure. Or would it be safe to say to prevent?
There's like more pros than cons.
Of nitrosamine, whatever you pronounce that word.
Yeah. So again, one of the biggest challenges of studying nutrition and the digestive system is I wish we could just open it up and see what's going on, right? But it's so challenging to study. So, we don't eat anything in isolation, right? Like you probably eat your salad with greens and like chicken on it.
Yeah.
But, with the more whole foods that you have in there, you're probably mitigating a lot of the production of things that may be considered dangerous, right? We call things antioxidants because they scavenge, free radicals or things that are like causing oxidative stress. So when we eat more of those whole foods that are super nutrient dense, they're like, no, this isn't going to happen. We're going to fix this. We're going to make sure that, we're keeping this environment balanced and safe. So that's kind of the best way I can kind of describe how that system works. It's kind of like, when we put like citrus on meats, it's supposed to help reduce some of the negative compounds in it. Like, they like meats and things cooked in like barbecued forms or like grilled can create these like negative cancer producing products. But if you put citrus on it or some form of an acid, it can like negate the impact. So it's kind of like that, right?
This is new to me.
Okay.
So I can eat all the barbecue I want once I put a little squeeze of lemon on it.
Again, it's like a balance, right? It's a balance of the two.
Well, thank you so much for coming here. We
Yeah.
were so stoked. I personally learned
I learned a lot.
Yeah.
You're making me want to take the test again.
Yeah.
And you also make me glad that I chose this script episode.
Yeah.
No, but you know so much and you have so much passion here. We were just talking about this before you came on. Like, she's like, man, she has so much passion for what she does versus like other people who talk about foods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then hearing your background makes sense because you got to grow up in an environment where food well, it's not something you just put in your mouth. It's something that, you know, the whole village came around and sent. It was a part of your sustenance.
Yeah.
And like lifestyle, right? So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, no, thank you for like noticing that and acknowledging it. I think that's exactly why I wanted to work more directly with people, because I've gotten to come to appreciate that it's not just food, it's not just one part of your life, it's every part of your life, right? And so kind of seeing and working with people in the behavioral aspect too, not just the science, but helping, you know, people understand that it's more than just food on your plate. It actually, you know, is such a big part of your culture and every aspect. So thank you so much for having
amazing.
me.
Outro, Jared?